Welcome to Mystery Chronicles, where we dive deep into some of the most intriguing and mysterious stories from around the world. Please like, comment, and subscribe. On a Wednesday morning in 1982, a young girl stayed home from school. Mary Kellerman was just 12 years old. She had a cold and a sore throat. Her parents wanted her to rest. Dennis, Jana, they gave her one extra-strength Tylenol capsule to help. Close up. Capsule and vintage Tylenol bottle. It was a normal thing to do. Tylenol was a trusted brand in millions of American homes. People used it for headaches, fevers, common pains. The Kellermans had no reason to think it was dangerous. They simply wanted to make their daughter feel better. It was an ordinary act of care, a gesture of love. Moments later, the unthinkable happened. Mary walked into the bathroom. She suddenly collapsed onto the floor. Her breathing became shallow and fast. Her parents rushed to her side, filled with confusion and terror. They called for an ambulance immediately. The paramedics arrived quickly, but there was little they could do. Mary's condition was critical, and she was fading fast. At the hospital, doctors worked desperately to save her life. It was too late. Mary Kellerman was pronounced dead at 9:56 a.m. on September 29th, 1982. No one understood what had just happened. A simple cold had turned into a sudden, inexplicable death. The doctors were baffled. A healthy 12-year-old girl does not just die from a common cold. Her death was listed as circa. But that diagnosis felt wrong. It was a guess, a placeholder for a mystery they could not solve. In another part of the Chicago suburbs, a man named Adam Janus also felt unwell. He was a postal worker, just 27 years old. He decided to stay home from work. He took a Tylenol to ease his aches. Within a very short time, he too collapsed. He was rushed to the same hospital where Mary had died just hours before. The medical staff started to feel a creeping sense of dread. Adam Janus died that afternoon. His family gathered at his home, consumed by grief and disbelief. They were trying to make sense of the sudden loss. His younger brother, Stanley, Stanley's wife, Teresa, were there to comfort Adam's family. They were both suffering from headaches brought on by the stress and sadness of the day. They went to the medicine cabinet in Adam's home. They found the same bottle of Tylenol he had used. They each took a capsule, hoping for some relief from their pain. They had no way of knowing they were holding poison in their hands. They were about to become the next victims in a silent, unfolding tragedy. The horror continued to ripple outward. After taking the Tylenol, Stanley Janus collapsed. Then his wife, Teresa, fell to the floor. Paramedics were called back to the same house where they'd just picked up Adam. Chaos and panic filled the small home. 3 members of the same family struck down in a single day. ER doctors faced an impossible situation. 3 people from one family dead or dying from the same mysterious cause. It was not a virus. It was not a genetic condition. It had to be something they all had in common, something they had all consumed. 2 firefighters, Philip Capitelli and Richard Keyworth, started connecting the dots. They talked to the grieving Janus family. They asked what Adam had done right before he collapsed. The family mentioned the Tylenol. The firefighters recalled another call that morning. The death of Mary Kellerman. They asked her family the same question. The answer was the same Tylenol. A chilling pattern began to emerge. A trusted pain reliever seemed to be the link. This was not a coincidence. This was far more sinister. They were at the edge of a public health crisis. The suspicion triggered a wider alarm. Cook County's medical examiner, Dr. Edmund Donahue, received the news. He and his team began work immediately. They needed to find the cause of death. They tested the victim's blood. The results were shocking. The blood contained massive lethal doses of cyanide. Cyanide is a fast-acting poison. It stops the body from using oxygen. It suffocates a person from the inside. The immediate mystery was solved. But a larger, terrifying question remained. How did cyanide get into the Tylenol capsules? The discovery unleashed fear across Chicago and the nation. The poison wasn't in one bottle, it was in multiple bottles, bought at different stores in different suburbs. This was not a factory accident. Someone had deliberately put poison on store shelves. The killer was anonymous, the killer was silent. The killings seemed random. The weapon was a common household product people trusted. Who would do such a thing and why? The race to find answers and stop the killing had just begun. With the poison confirmed, the focus shifted from medicine to law enforcement. The news spread like a shockwave through Chicago's police departments, through public health offices. This was no longer just a medical mystery. It was a homicide investigation on an unprecedented scale. Police began a desperate race against time. Arlington Heights, Elk Grove Village, Schaumburg. They had to warn the public immediately. Every Tylenol bottle on every shelf, every person with a headache was a potential victim. The challenge was immense. How do you alert millions of people to a danger hiding in their own medicine cabinets? The answer came through the media. On the evening of September 29th, the first warnings hit the airwaves. Television news broadcasts broke into programming. Radio stations issued urgent bulletins. They told people to stop using Tylenol immediately. They specifically mentioned extra-strength Tylenol capsules. Do not take this product. Your life could be in danger. Dr. David Axelrod went on television to deliver the warning. His face was grim. His tone was serious. He explained the link between the deaths and the cyanide-laced capsules. The warnings had an immediate effect. Fear gripped the Chicago area. People rushed to their bathrooms. People rushed to their kitchens. The phones at police stations and hospitals rang nonstop. People asked what they should do. Was their bottle safe? Should they throw it away? Could they get sick just by touching it? The city was on edge. A simple, trusted product had become an object of fear. The sense of safety in one's own home was shattered. The poisoner had not just killed people, they had poisoned the public's trust. Meanwhile, more victims were discovered. The warnings had come too late for some. In Winfield, Mary Rayner died after taking a Tylenol capsule. In Lombard, Paula Prince was found dead in her apartment. Police found an open bottle of Tylenol and a receipt on her counter. The death toll was now 7. The poisoner's reach extended across multiple towns and different batches, and the random nature of the attacks made everyone feel vulnerable. No one knew where the killer would strike next. As the death toll climbed, Johnson & Johnson faced a crisis unlike any other. James Burke received the news in the middle of the night. He immediately understood the gravity. The company's reputation and the public's safety were on the line. Johnson & Johnson had built its brand on trust. Tylenol was his flagship product. An executive initially suggested the problem was isolated to Chicago. He thought it was a local issue, perhaps sabotage in a few stores. Burke knew that was the wrong way to think. He made a decision that would become a landmark. He chose public safety over profit. The company's first priority was to protect its customers. On September 30th, Johnson & Johnson issued a massive recall. They pulled every single bottle from store shelves, first in the Chicago area, then across the entire country. They halted all production and stopped all advertising. The recall involved 31 million bottles, over $100 million in retail value. It was a huge financial hit, but Burke believed it was the only ethical choice. He knew one more death was unacceptable. The company launched a massive public information campaign, full-page ads in newspapers and television commercials. The message was clear: do not use any Tylenol product. They set up toll-free hotlines for consumers. They offered to exchange capsules people had at home for solid tablets free of charge. Johnson & Johnson worked closely with the police and with the Food and Drug Administration. They were open and transparent about everything. This approach was revolutionary. Instead of downplaying the crisis, they confronted it head-on, putting the consumer first. That helped manage public panic, but fear remained. The recall confirmed the danger was real and widespread. People across America emptied their medicine cabinets. Tylenol bottles were thrown into the trash or brought to police stations. The economic impact was immediate. Johnson & Johnson's stock price plummeted. Competitors' pain reliever sales soared, but the company's response earned it respect. In crisis, they chose to do the right thing. Their actions set a new standard for corporate responsibility for decades to come. Section 4. The hunt begins. With the public warned and the product recalled, the full weight of the investigation fell upon law enforcement. A multi-jurisdictional task force was formed. Local police from the Chicago suburbs, the Illinois State Police, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The investigation was given a code name, Timer. The number of investigators quickly grew to over 100. They faced a daunting task. The crime scenes were not dark alleys. They were public drugstores and supermarkets. The victims were chosen at random. The killer had left behind almost no traditional evidence. The first step was to trace the poison bottles. Investigators collected Tylenol from every store in the Chicago area. They had to figure out where the tampered bottles had been purchased. They traced bottles to a Jewel Osco supermarket, to a Walgreens pharmacy, and they found another poisoned bottle at a Dominic's Finer Foods. The bottles came from different production lots and from different plants. That confirmed the tampering did not happen at the factory. The poisoner had taken the bottles from the stores, added the cyanide, and returned them to the shelves to be sold. Investigators began to profile the killer. This was not a crime of passion. It was cold, calculated, detached. The killer had to have some knowledge of chemicals. They had to be patient and methodical enough to open some capsules, fill them with poison, and carefully put them back together. They also had to be bold enough to walk into multiple stores and place the poisoned bottles back on the shelves. The motive was a complete mystery. Was it an act of terrorism, a grudge against Johnson & Johnson, or the work of a deranged individual seeking to create chaos? The lack of a clear motive made the search for a suspect even harder. Thousands of tips poured in from the public. The task force had to investigate every lead, no matter how small or strange. They looked into disgruntled employees from Johnson & Johnson and local drugstore employees. They interviewed people with a history of mental illness and people with a fascination with poison. The pressure was immense. The entire country was watching. The media followed every development, reporting on the fear that had gripped the nation. The investigators knew they were not just hunting a murderer. They were trying to restore a sense of safety stolen from every American home. The clock was ticking and the killer was still out there. The Tylenol crisis marked the abrupt end of an era of innocence for American consumers. Before 1982, people trusted the products they bought off the shelf. The idea that a stranger could tamper with a product and place it back on a store shelf was almost unthinkable. The murders shattered this fundamental trust. Suddenly, every package seemed vulnerable. The industry had to change almost overnight. Old packaging, a simple box with a bottle inside and a cotton ball under the cap, was no longer enough. Johnson & Johnson led the way with a multi-layered defense. First, a glued box, till if flaps were torn. Second, a tight plastic neckband on the bottle cap. Third, a tough foil seal glued across the bottle mouth. The triple seal container became the new industry standard. Other drug makers followed. The trend moved into food, foil seals on jars of peanut butter, plastic rings on milk jugs. Today, these features are ubiquitous. A direct legacy of the 1982 poisonings. The Tylenol murders did more than just change packaging. They revealed a gaping hole in American law. Before the crisis, there was no specific federal law that made it a crime to tamper with a consumer product. Lawmakers in Washington, D.C. realized existing laws weren't equipped to handle this new type of terrorism. Congress moved with unusual speed. The bill made product tampering a federal crime. It created stiff penalties, long prison sentences, heavy fines for anyone convicted of tampering or even threatening to do so. The bill was informally known as the Tylenol bill. The new law was signed by President Ronald Reagan in 1983. The FDA also took on a more powerful role. The agency was tasked with creating and enforcing new regulations for tamper-evident packaging. The new federal law and the strict FDA regulations created a comprehensive system designed to make it much harder for a tragedy like the Tylenol murders to ever happen again. The killer was never caught, and this lack of resolution has allowed the case to linger in the public memory as a chilling, unsolved mystery. This undercurrent of fear changed consumer behavior in subtle but lasting ways. People became more vigilant. They started to inspect packaging before buying it. The unanswered questions of the case have also kept it alive. Who was the killer? What was their motive? Was it James Lewis, the extortionist who always denied his involvement? Ultimately, the legacy of the Tylenol murders is a complex mixture of tragedy and progress. 7 innocent people lost their lives in a terrifying way. But their deaths forced a nationwide reckoning with product safety. The crisis led to revolutionary changes in packaging and new laws that have undoubtedly saved many lives. The price of that safety was paid by 7 people in Chicago, a debt that the tamper-proof seals on our products quietly remind us of every single day. Thank you for watching Mystery Chronicles. Please like, comment, and subscribe.